Welcome to Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Brought to you by our title sponsor, Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Come along with us as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. We have partnered with Mountain Tough Fitness Lab to help get you in shape and mentally stronger. Whether you're a veteran hunter or just starting out, the Mountain Tough app will take you to the next level. We personally train using the Mountain Tough programs, and we believe in it so much that we want to give you 6 weeks for free using code SHEEPBC. That's SHEEPBC. Check out Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. You won't be disappointed. Well, good morning, Jen. I'm so excited that we're finally able to connect on a podcast. We've talked about this forever, and it's great to finally connect.
Good morning. I'm still surprised that you would want me on your podcast.
Are you kidding me? Are you? Yeah, no.
I'm not being humble. When people say, "So what do you do?" I usually stumble, and now that the girls are adults, I can't really say, "Oh, I'm a full-time mom," because that would be BS. And so I usually say, "Oh, I volunteer, and I love to cook, and I garden," and it just sounds not like something that would be on a podcast.
Well, my question when someone asks you that is, what don't you do? I look at you and you're so involved, and I know you in the quote not-for-profit volunteer world, but I know how busy you are with so many different things, and and that's the thing. Like this volunteer racket that we get swept up in, it's not for the faint of heart, right? Like if anyone can volunteer and do sort of a half-baked job, but there's other people that just throw their, and you see them, right? Like, and I look at the board that I've had the pleasure of serving on with the Wild Sheep Foundation. Of course, the Wild Sheep Society BC, I'm sure RMBS is no different. It's just this true dedication. And there's some people that just like, how can you do that? Like, how can you afford that time and effort and commitment, right? It's inspiring, really.
Well, and so many of my friends will say, "Oh, what are you doing today?" Sheep stuff. And because to try and explain, it might be, Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management. It might be RMBS, wild sheep, of course, and just different things. And it's just hard to explain it to someone who, mostly non-hunters, but love me, love my family, love what we do. And so are very tolerant of it, but have no clue until they'll come to, especially an RMBS banquet. Occasionally we've had a couple of friends that have come to, Wild Sheep and GSCO events, but they don't get it, they just don't get it. So a lot of my time is spent with those kinds of people and just convincing them why what we do is so important, because it doesn't matter which committee I'm on, whether it be 1Campfire or especially the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management. We're trying to get to that non-hunter all the time. And that's who I talk to every day. I'm going to go for lunch with my girlfriend later, and I know she's going to say, "So what have you been up to?" Sheep, wild sheep, wildlife, and then of course, gardening and my bees.
Okay, so let's back the bus up here, because a lot of people listening to this won't know who Jann Demaske is. So first of all, where's home for you? Let's talk a little about where you're from, and we talk about, I guess, the Wild Sheep Foundation. RMBS is Rocky Mountain Bighorn Society. So you're in Colorado, born and raised. How long have you been in Colorado, Jan?
Lived in Colorado now for, 45 years, proudly 57. And so I was born in Casper, Wyoming, and then transferred around a lot when I was a kid. So actually had an unbelievable experience to live in Jackson Hole in the 70s when it was a small town. So, learned to ski at the base of the Tetons. How cool is that? So grew up in Wyoming until I was 12. And then we moved to Grand Junction, which for us so Wyoming and Colorado have this fun little rivalry. And we're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going to move to Colorado. and moved here when I was in fifth, sixth grade, lived in Grand Junction, which was a big town for us. Then we moved to Denver, and it was like, what in the world? How is this even gonna, how are we gonna survive? And then I came to the area where I live now for as a junior in college. Went to a Catholic college in Denver for the first 2 years, and then moved up to Greeley for college, never thinking I would stay. So Greeley's known for its huge feedlots. So back in the 80s, it smelled bad. And we all were like, oh, you don't want to live in Greeley. And I never thought I would live there. And now I can't imagine living anywhere else. I live fairly close, 15 minutes away in Windsor now, and can't imagine any place else.
Awesome. So growing up, you weren't a hunter. Is that correct, Jann?
No, actually, my family was hunters, but I didn't really hunt. I went a lot until my dad hunted. My mom did a bit, but that was our fall family vacation, was to go deer hunting, and would go to the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, Hyattville, Wyoming, and we had a big kitchen. The big tents, wall tent. So there was a huge wall tent, and everybody had their campers. And so that's what we did in the fall. And we went deer hunting and elk hunting. And then when I met Jeff, one of our first adventures was to go deer hunting on the western slope of Colorado. And still don't consider myself like in my top 10. That's not I don't say, oh, I'm a hunter. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I love to garden. God's very important to me. I love my church family. So, you get down there pretty far, and hunter's there. So I was raised with it, but never. When I was a kid, it was a big deal. Like my mom, when she got her first deer, that was huge because none of the other aunties hunted. And so here was my mom, this little tiny 5'2" fireball, who gets this deer in Wyoming. And it's at it's getting dark. And my dad kind of, pushes her to the side and says, well, I'll gut it and skin it, because that's just, that's what the, man did. And so that was kind of, my dad bird hunted a bit, not a ton. So it really wasn't until, later on that I, really dove into this. But for the first 20-ish years we were married, we hunted 2 weeks out of the year at most. Deer and elk would apply for everything. And, I would hunt a little, cooked. I cook for deer hunting every year. I probably make, 20 casseroles and send the boys out to Kansas to go deer hunting. And I can pack for a sheep hunt better than anyone. I'm telling you, there is not a sheep hunter out there. I don't care how accomplished they are. I would put my skills up to any hunter. I can pack for Africa. I can pack for Tajikistan. And that's not a request of Jeff. That's my deal. I want to make sure he has the socks. He has the all the stuff. So I'm the best hunting packer in the world. But, as far as actually doing it, I'm a really great supporter. That's why I call myself a conservationist, because I love this stuff. Love it. Love it.
Wow. And it shows, and you've done so much. And I want to really deep dive into that in a minute, but I want you to I remember you telling a story, and I just got such a kick out of it. And I'm going to let you tell the story, but I'm going to set the stage. So anyone that doesn't know Jann or the Demaske family, Jeff and Maddie are, if you Google their names, they're the top of the list when it comes to hunting in the outdoor. Like Jeff hunts all over the world. Maddie hunts all over the world. Maddie's Jeff and Jann's daughter. So very, very, very accomplished hunters. Like, anyone that thinks of hunting, Jeff's name is going to come up for sure. Maddie's name is going to come up for sure. So that's the family we're dealing with. But I remember you saying, can you tell me the story about your Rocky tag that there was, I think it was a permit that was up, and
Yeah,
can you share that story?
Yeah, we were at Wild Sheep Foundation. And just a little plug, we also have a younger daughter, Liz, and she's like I am. She's a huge hunting supporter and is engaged to a hunter. She's a rock star hunter. I just want to give her a little plug. But yeah, so we were at Sheep Show back in, I think it was 2014, and Jeff had already gotten some sheep, and Maddie had too. And so the Colorado tag was coming up. Now, a little bit of backstory. I was still drinking at that point. Now I am almost 8 years sober, which I'm very proud of. But so I was drinking Chardonnay like it was my job. And we're sitting there, and we're at a regular banquet table. Jeff's in front of me, so he has his back to me. And so that's Jeff, then me, then Craig Kisselbeck, who is just a fantastic guide somewhere in Canada. You probably know where he's at. Terminus Mountain. I don't have any idea where that's in Canada. Anyway, so Craig's sitting behind me, and the Colorado tag comes up, and I am thinking, I'm going to do this. So it was John Bear was the auctioneer at the time. And, I keep, raising my hand, and I can see Craig Kisselback like squirming in his chair. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know why that is. And again, pretty heavy into the Chardonnay at this point. And so John is looking towards us, and all of a sudden Jeff shakes his head like, I don't know why you're looking at me, John. And Jeff turns around and he says, I don't want, what are you doing? And I said, I'm bidding on this tag. And he's like, I don't want that tag. And I was like, it's not for a lot of swear words, screw you. It's not for you. It's for me. And he's like, what are you doing? And by this point, very embarrassed. It's not embarrassing. It's part of my story. I was an alcoholic at the time. I was out of shape, had zero business going sheep hunting, but I was like, oh, don't tempt me. So now the challenge is on. He's told me I can't. And I was like, sorry. And I don't even remember what I bid. But really cool about that was, when they said, how the auctioneer goes, sold. And part of me was thinking, what did I just do? And part of me was, haha, Jeff, I did what I wanted to do. We're not that way. It's not, you spend $1, I spend $1. You spend $1, I spend $1. But it was the challenge of him saying, you can't do that. But what is really cool about it is that's what started my sheep journey. I have a beautiful Rocky to my name, but more importantly, really, is that night, Terry Myers from Rocky Mountain Bighorn Society came up to congratulate me. So RMBS holds the tag, and they take it to the sheep show to auction it. So he came up and he was congratulating me, and, are you excited? And part of me was excited and part of me was terrified. But it really started where I was going to go, and that, next thing you know, they asked if I want to volunteer for the board. And I thought, well, heck, why not? My girls at that point were in high school and I didn't really have as much to do. And, so that tag really got me going.
That's a cool story. Yeah. Even better than I remembered it. So yeah, super cool. So you talked a little bit about, this dipping your toes in the water of conservation and how you self-identify as a conservationist versus a hunter. And so let's talk a little bit about that. So it's interesting, Jann, like the thing that is cool with you is you've worked at the chapter level with Rocky Mountain Bighorn Society, Coloradoans for Responsible Wildlife. You're involved with them. Wild Sheep Foundation, you're now the acting secretary for the Wild Sheep Foundation on the board of directors there. You're 1Campfire initiative chair for Wild Sheep Foundation, Wild Sheep Society BC. It's quite a laundry list, I'll be honest with you, of volunteer work. And I'm sure you do other volunteer work through the church and other stuff too. So let's talk about like, where does that motivation come from? The thing is that, you know, there's time, talent, and treasure, right? We talk about those three things that in conservation, right? We kind of need all three of those. And you guys are incredibly generous. The amount of that you guys financially do to support the resource is phenomenal. It's incredible. Very generous to a number of organizations. And then all this volunteer work. And I think it's not just you. I think Madeline has done a ton of work, and I'm sure Liz does too, maybe outside the hunting community. But you know, there's so much service that I know Madeline was very involved with RMBS, and I think now, is she still at SCI? Is that she's still involved?
Yep. So she's a litigator for SCI, and we're all you know, life members of several, you know, SCI, DSC, Wild Sheep, GSCO, RMBS.
Wild Sheep Society BC.
Wild Sheep Society BC. Yep.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to keep you cut you off. Keep going. So that there's a lot of stuff, and you know, you're so generous with your time, like you know, and it's incredible the amount that you do. Not just like my exposure with your volunteer work has been through the Wild Sheep Foundation, 1Campfire, the Wild Sheep Society BC, but I know it's much bigger than that. Lots of times we'll try and jump on a call and you're busy with Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife, or I know you've done a ton of heavy lifting at RMBS over the years. So talk about that motivation, and where does that come from? Is it because of your interest in hunting, or is it your interest in service? Where does it come from?
So really at the base of it, God calls us to serve others. And that really has been the backbone of all of it. And whether it be, you know, I look back, I never thought that I would be a full-time mom. When I got my first job at Anheuser-Busch in Fort Collins, I thought, oh, I've made it. I'm at a Fortune 500 company. I'm doing occupational health. And then I have these two little people. And I realized really what was the most important thing, and that was raising them. And so Jeff and I tried to work together for a couple of years, and we decided, okay, it's either work together or be married. And we decided to, you know, be married, and I would raise the girls, not raise them, but, you know, be at home with them and do that kind of thing. And we have a very traditional, you know, we never say Jeff wears the pants in the family. That's, you know, we're not that way. But from the time I was a little kid, you know, my mom would say, you know, what you do reflects upon your family. And so from the time the girls were little, it was acts of service. It, you know, whether it be baking, you know, cupcakes for the first grade, or, you know, I was FFA mom, where, you know, the FFA kids needed a fundraiser, they needed a chili supper. I would jump in and help because that was my job. And so, you know, it's those kinds of things have always been, you know, quote, my job. And, you know, I was golf mom. And, you know, that was just, it was always, again, acts of service, because that was the way, you know, my mother was, both of my grandmothers. That was what I saw as a kid. And so then when the girls went to college, I found myself in this really strange spot of, I have an empty house, and, you know, what am I going to do? So I volunteer a bit at church. I work in the nursery. And the reason I do that is because I remember years ago being able to sit in the sanctuary without my kids there, and I could, you know, praise and worship God in just a quiet manner without my kiddos. And so now, you know, people kind of laugh because I don't have grandchildren. And I don't have small children, but I still, you know, work in the nursery. Again, it's just, you know, a couple hours a month where I can, you know, serve my fellow, you know, churchgoers. And with the Wild Sheep, RMBS, I didn't really, you know, I just kind of jumped in. I thought this is a great way for me to have a conversation piece with Jeff, because once you become an empty nester, it's a little weird. Suddenly you go from cooking for 4 people to cooking for 2, and you don't have high school or college activities to talk about. And you've been married, by the time the girls went to college, we'd probably been married, 20-ish years. And you have to find some different things to talk about besides work and, what's the newest development that Jeff's working on, or, how's the garden. And sheep, wild sheep, it was like, oh, I can do this. I can act as secretary. I can take notes. And then I realized, what? Those things I went to college for, I think sometimes college teaches you how to learn. And what Wild Sheep and RMBS and all these others has done is it's given me kind of that, I hate to say purpose, but I use my brain. I get to, learn so many things. I look at, what's happening in Colorado now with the mountain lion, bobcat, and lynx. I'm learning so much about legislation. 5 years ago when I first started on the Wild Sheep Board, I'm learning about places that, like the Kootenays, and we went to Kamloops, been to like all of these really cool things, and I feel like all of that just stems from those little acts of service of, I can do this. This is easy. I can, give my time. I say a lot that I have the luxury of time. I don't have I have the luxury of not having a full-time job. I'm still part of the business, but so we have a construction, excavating, and development business. And, years ago, I was the realtor. And to be honest, and probably a little braggadocious, I was a damn good realtor. But Jeff was my boss, and that didn't go over so great. So I had to find some place to, use my talents, my time, and it went from, again, all those FFA things, golf mom, to now the sheep world, really, for the most part, wildlife in general, but wild sheep is definitely our shtick.
This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Frontiersman Gear. Thank you, Sitka Gear and Frontiersman Gear, for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems. So, Jann, you mentioned that part of this journey around volunteering and getting involved was kids are out of the house and maintaining, building, I guess, a relationship with Jeff, more of a relationship or something, having something in common there. But there's other things you could have chosen, and obviously you had to have an interest in it, and something that drove you to do that. So, would you say, is it the community, our wild sheep community, that does it? Is it about the benevolence and the sort of joy you give back from, knowing that you're doing something really good for wild places and wildlife? Obviously you care about wildlife and wild places, having grown up as a hunter, and obviously your family's very, dyed in the wool in the hunting community. So, when you think about it and you look at sort of the motivation, beyond, that connection with Jeff and everything and your family, what do you think's driving that? What gives you the most joy? Is it the community? Is it the good you're doing for wildlife, wild sheep?
So I hate to say all of that, but it is. It's definitely all of that. And it was funny when I loved my time with the Rocky Mountain Bighorn Society, but the community that I feel with wild sheep is just, it's a family, and it sounds so dorky, but I remember the first sheep, either first and second sheep show, but just Jeff and Maddie went. And because Liz and I were like, we're not going to go to a hunting show. It just was not even a thing. And Jeff's like, come on, we really want you to go. So Liz and I went, and the girls were teenagers. So, 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there. And the first time we went, people were so welcoming. and, come and sit down. They didn't, we met our taxidermist, Chris Kamak, that very first sheep show that Liz and I went to. And now they are, they're family. They're part of our family. But that first night, it was so, looking back, so we go to sit down at a Friday night banquet. And of course, we don't have a seat. Jeff knows quite a few people. I know one or two people. And we sit down with Ken and Anna Vorsek. And anybody who is a sheep hunter knows Anna. She is unbelievable. First woman to get a fanaz with a bow. She's just a badass. Well, of course, we don't know who they are. And, we're just visiting. And Maddie is in awe. She's like, Mom, do you know who that is? And I'm like, oh, it's this nice lady named Anna. And again, so welcoming and just lovely. And they said, hey, why don't, somebody said, why don't you guys come to the ladies' lunch? And we're like, oh, okay. So we go to ladies' lunch, and again, felt so welcomed. And, everybody's laughing and making jokes. And it wasn't about hunting. It was just, at that point, probably 300 women just laughing for 3 hours. And again, then the banquets and all of that kind of thing. That year, Jeff bought the Colorado tag. And the next year, when it was time to go to Sheep Show, it was, okay, are we going? And Liz and I are like, absolutely. Because again, it's that family. It's like the family reunion with the family that you actually like. Yeah. Here are all your friends, and you can't wait to see them. I did family reunions as a kid, and it was, you had to go. And now we block off, we make sure that there's time for Sheep Show. And then there is that joy of giving. It's a position I never thought I would be, where that we could be, that we could donate funds. It really is pretty cool. We say often that we're blessed beyond measure. And, part of our family makeup is we hunt and fish. We are outside, from the time the girls were tiny. It was, the minute they could hold a fishing rod, they were fishing. And, one of Maddie's fondest, young hunting memories was she was in a backpack. She was in her dad's backpack, antelope hunting. So when we can give to those kinds of things, it's so heartwarming. And, it does. It just brings you absolute joy. But the family part of it, we never get to, we very rarely get to, actually see one another during Sheep Show, because we're talking to our friends, whether they be outfitters or, and I even will say, oh, these are my RMBS friends, or, oh, those are my wild sheep friends. Or, it's so funny that it's that camaraderie, but it is joyful, and it is wonderful to be at a position where, we can help others. Less Than One Club. We love to support Less Than One Club, because to see somebody who's never shot a sheep have that be able to, potentially shoot a sheep. It's really, it's a privilege. It's a huge privilege.
Talk a little bit about how important the collaboration is to you, and sort of why it's important to be supporting. Because, like I said, people are very tribal, right? They tend to be, I don't support them because I'm this or whatever, right? Touch a little bit on that for me, please, Jann.
And I don't know why. This is definitely, collaboration has become my soapbox. And so much of it is because we're involved in the different organizations, Dallas Safari Club, Safari Club International, Grand Slam, Wild Sheep BC. And, from the outside, we're all working towards the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, a sheep or a deer or an elk. It's all on the same landscape. And probably, oh my goodness, well, probably my first sheep show. I, heard about some of the rumblings of how different organizations didn't get along, all of them, to be quite honest, bow hunters, rifle hunters. And I am very simple minded, and I just said, well, why can't we just work together? And a very famous hunter was like, young lady, you don't understand. And I just kept saying, but I do understand. I understand that if I spend $1 and we can work together, if I give it to wildlife and it goes to whoever needs it at the time, that's better than $1 that goes to sheep and deer and elk. And they might all be in the same area, but we have to just work together. And very kumbaya-ish. But here's a really kind of a different example. We have a group in our area called Serve 6.8, and it is a donation hub. And what they do is they bring in all the resources, they bring in the clothes, they bring in the food, they bring in everything, and then they put it out to the different churches. Something crazy like 50 different churches in our area. Whoever is of greatest need. So if one church is in need of formula, then guess what? That's where it goes. So instead of all 50 churches getting one thing of formula, this one church who needs all 50 cans of formula gets it. Well, really, isn't that the way we should be with wildlife? I know it's very simple, but truly, that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You're taking me for a tour of the house, are you, Jann?
I am. Jeff just turned on the television, so I'm going to go to a different part of the house.
Awesome.
There we go. A quiet spot.
Perfect. I'll let you get settled.
Okay. I'm good now. Welcome to my laundry room.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about you've gotten very heavily involved with the Wild Sheep Foundation, and you've been on the board now. You mentioned about 5 years. Talk a little bit about your new role as secretary, and then a little bit of your committee work. And I want to talk about 1Campfire specifically because that relates to us here in BC, but let's touch a little bit on what's going on with the foundation and the board work that you're involved with there.
So 4 or 5 years ago, well, it was before COVID. Isn't it funny how we base everything on where it happened during COVID? But I was appointed to the board, and so I served 1 year, 2 years, don't remember. And, kind of got my feet wet. Then I went up for election and wasn't elected, which was a really good lesson for me on hard work. And that you can't just, sit on your laurels. So about 18 months ago or so, I was reelected to the board and, just jumped back in. But even when that year off, I stayed engaged with my different committees. So I'm on the ladies' lunch. I chair the ladies' lunch committee, Artemis, which is our women in conservation woman conservationist award, 1Campfire, which has, and I'm not saying this because it's you, has honestly become probably my favorite committee because I really feel like we're doing something towards my friends, towards that non-hunter. And it just fits in so well. I've just recently started working with the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, and they just go so hand in hand that it's pretty cool. So then just May 1st, I became secretary of the board, which I love to be engaged in board meetings. I'm a little bossy sometimes, and I like my voice to be heard. But I think that that's why I was elected to the board is because I bring a different perspective than, because I'm more the conservationist. I come from an interesting family. But I was a little worried about being secretary because I want to make sure I'm engaged in those conversations and make sure that I really want to speak for our members. I always want to make sure that I keep our, what do our members want? Not just what do what is there, 11, 12, 13 of us around the table, not just what we think, but what the guy, down the road thinks, the guy who's never gotten a sheep, but considers himself a sheep hunter. I want to speak for that guy. So, I was a little worried about being secretary just because, just doing the work of it. But I want to stay engaged in that, in the meetings.
That's awesome. Now, have you had your first board meeting as a secretary yet?
I am not. Nope.
Okay.
Not until chapters and affiliates in Calgary.
Awesome. That's very exciting. Ladies luncheon. So you said you attended your first ladies luncheon, and you made a point. You're like, oh, there was about 300 people there. I'm guessing there's more now. Talk about you taking that over and kind of the successes you've had at the ladies luncheon. And are you still involved with that?
I am. I'm still chair of ladies lunch. And so when I first started attending Sheep Show, so the girls and I would go, and we had a little enclave of gals that we would go and drink too much of whatever the signature cocktail was. Bought some crazy stuff. Bought a fishing trip to Zihuatanejo. But so in I believe it was 2018 or 2019. Actually, to go back a year, so the ladies' luncheons were pretty fancy, lots of money spent, and they were a lot of fun, but they were very long and a lot of alcohol, and they had kind of become, just not as much our shtick. So some friends and I decided one year we were going to boycott the ladies' lunch. So we all went to this great place in Reno called Hash House A Go-Go and had a fantastic lunch, but we boycotted the ladies' lunch. Well, guess what? Gray Thornton called me about 6 months later, and he said, hey, any chance you would like to help with ladies' lunch? And I was like, I don't really know that that's my shtick. And he goes, well, we have an opening as chair. And I thought, oh, this is what you get for boycotting. So I was given a tailgate party, and my philosophy was, okay, let's see how much money we can make for sheep. So the ladies were really used to everybody gets a gift. We have, beautiful flowers, beautiful linens. And I was like, oh no, we're going to raise money for sheep. So we have this tailgate party. We have a great time. Raised some money, but the ladies were like, what about our gifts? This was I went a little too redneck. So then the next year we did, I started to get in the groove of things. Then unfortunately COVID hit. And then 2 years ago, I think, Glenn Landris and I decided that we were going to have a competition between Life Member Breakfast and Ladies Luncheon because we went from, so my first year, we'd made a little bit of money to I was like, oh no, we're going to make some money. We are going to be a force. And so Glenn and I made a competition between Life Member Breakfast and Ladies Luncheon. And, Ladies Luncheon is 330 women and Life Member Breakfast is something like 600. But, it made for a really fun competition and it got people excited. And that's all that really what is needed. And so this last year we did a 70s theme. And I think I finally found a groove of, we still have to have be entertained and have a nice lunch, but also raise money for sheep. So finding that happy medium to where it's a good time, but we're not throwing it all out the window. So this upcoming year, our theme is Lady in Red. I think that was a song from the 80s. And so again, we're just trying to always find that groove of, okay, we want to have a good time, but I want to raise money for sheep.
Yeah, cool. Now, it was a competition. What was the outcome if you won or you lost? What were you competing for? Just bragging rights, or was?
Some of it was bragging rights. At one point, it was Rocky Mountain oysters, which are basically sheep nuts, fried. So where we live, Severance, Colorado, there's a bar in town called Bruce's Bar, and it's well known for their bull Rocky Mountain oysters. And so when Glenn used that as the challenge, I was like, I'm a redneck from Wyoming. That doesn't do anything for me.
That doesn't.
So then we tried to get him, if he lost, that he'd have to wear a dress. It really became a bragging rights thing.
Yeah.
Last year, I ended up dancing on stage because no reason other than, again, Glenn and I just want people to get excited about it. And, this is fun, but we also want to raise money for sheep.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, I'd say you've done a heck of a good job this last year for the foundation with Glenn at the helm and you on the board and a ton of other great conservationists and staff. And it's amazing what the foundation's done. Sheep Week was off the hook. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Let's talk about 1Campfire. What's going on with the 1Campfire committee? What's going on over there? What's up and coming? Let's chat about that.
What a cool committee. For anybody that doesn't know 1Campfire, it started when BC lost the grizzly hunt, and it was created 2017.
Yeah.
Was that, or is that when the way more about the history than I do?
Yeah, you're right, though. 2017 is when we lost the hunt, and then 18, I think, is when the sort of 1Campfire evolved. It actually maybe didn't come to fruition until in 19, but the conception happened in 18, yeah.
Yeah, so when I started on the committee was during COVID, and Jonathan Proctor was the chair at the time, and he did such a great job during COVID of just, how are we going to do this? How are we going to continue to get this message out, really to that non-hunter? We're not going to get the anti-hunter to agree or understand that this is our way of life, that this is more than it is. It's just a way of life. It's the way we were raised. It's the meat that we get to harvest. We're not going to get to the anti-hunter, but we can get to the non-hunter. And that's the really cool thing that 1Campfire does, is we're trying to continually reach that non-hunter to make them understand that, we're good guys. We're just like you. This is why we do what we do. And how can we get you to vote with us? We don't do any protests or anything like that. But if that were to, if it were to come down to that, we want them to understand, why we do what we do, and that we're very much alike. The people that, are part of 1Campfire are not just, we're not going to the hunter. We're going to the biker, the hiker, the fisherman. Oftentimes, hunters and anglers, we're the same breed, but we're thought of very differently. Angling, fishing is much more accepted than hunting. Not really sure. I still don't understand why, but getting everybody, around on that same page of, how can we work together? How can we enjoy this beautiful God-given resource together and not not trample on anyone's, right to hunt, right to fish, that type of thing. And we mostly are a social media campaign. And we've gone through some hills and valleys, and we've had great committee members. we have a pretty small committee now, just because the heavy lifting is done by our social media manager, Mike Berard, who in himself, and I mean, no offense by this, is a quirky cat who is super creative and is a great writer and knows how to, speak to kind of that non-hunter. He's a brand new hunter. He's just getting into it himself, and he can take beautiful images and create a story. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just take those beautiful images and let people realize that we're all in this together, and that, sometimes we just need to agree to disagree, and that's okay. That's a very 1950s model, but that's kind of where we're at. Is maybe you'll never hunt. I'm 57 years old. Can't say as I'll ever shoot another animal. Not sure, because I'm really digging going with. I love to go with Jeff. I love to watch new hunters. But again, I love the resource, and it's getting us all on that same page of, we love the resource. We love and the campfire. You think about it, when you were kids, didn't matter who you were. You'd hang out around the campfire, you'd BS, you'd make s'mores. And it's one of those, it's a leveling place that the campfire is. It doesn't matter if you're the president of a company or you're the janitor of the company. The campfire is a very leveling place. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just, kind of level the playing ground and make sure that non-hunter understands that, hey, we're in this together.
Awesome. Very cool. Great campaign, great initiative. We've been partners with the Wild Sheep Foundation, Wild Sheep Society BC, which has been phenomenal partnership. They've been such a great partner to support this, and then to have your leadership on that committee, Jann, has been super cool. And just, I love working with you on it. It's such a great, and I really like I love that you don't identify as a hunter, right? Like you're more of a hunter than a lot of people, but you don't self-identify that way, and I think that's super cool. And I think that's what brings. I think you bringing that perspective to 1Campfire is a unique perspective, and I think a lot of people couldn't do what you do because of it. And I think it's really, really, it's done the campaign 1Campfire well, having you lead it. So.
Well, thank you. And it's that collaboration. There's that word again. There's my soapbox word. That collaboration of whether you're a hunter, an angler, a hiker who will never carry a bow or a gun, but we all have to work together towards any of these goals. Whether it be keeping our trails clean and manicured, or making sure that the sheep are well conserved, but that they need to be hunted. It really doesn't matter, all of them. It's all about collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Hey, I'm just curious. So there was a campaign in Colorado. I know you're very familiar with it. Hug a Hunter. How has that, it's kind of revered as like the go-to for talking to non-hunters. How's that campaign done? I know initially it was really well respected. Kind of where does it sit now? Is it a pretty effective program in Colorado, do you find?
So you don't hear much about the Hug a Hunter right now. A lot of money was spent on it. It's a really cool initiative. Unfortunately, in Colorado, we are very divided. Our legislature and our government, our politicians, are tending to be quite liberal. And so in Colorado, to be liberal, you're more likely to not be a hunter. And we have quite a few in our government that are anti-hunters. And so we're unfortunately very fractured in Colorado right now. And so this really great campaign of Hug a Hunter, you see it a bit, but not as much as you did, say, even 5 years ago. they've changed the narrative a little bit to where now it's, we're thanking hunters, we're thanking anglers for the dollars that they put in. But you don't see it as much as really you should, because again, we need to be, we're all using the same resource, and but because of our political structure in Colorado, it's just so divided. We recently reintroduced wolves, which was it was done by ballot, which is not a good idea. We shouldn't do a ballot box biology. We need to listen to the experts, the biologists, the wildlife biologists. But instead, it was put to a vote, and it was a very small margin. It won by a very small margin. And so now we've reintroduced wolves into Colorado with a very poor management philosophy. There is no hunting. Right now we're noticing a lot of wolf depredation. And the newest thing is there is an initiative to ban mountain lion, lynx, and bobcat hunting. So in a state like Colorado, you wouldn't think those things would be going on. But we're a very divided state. We are, our population goes from Colorado Springs to Longmont, Fort Collins, and they can outvote the rest of us. It doesn't matter if it's an oil and gas initiative or if it's a wildlife initiative. The urban areas can outvote, us rural guys. And so, unfortunately, the hug a hunter it seems like it's been kind of put on the back burner a bit with Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been involved in most recently is Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife, and talk a little bit about the work that they're doing. And I think it's relating to this initiative, this ballot box stuff that's going on right now. Talk about why you've jumped on board in supporting them, Jann, and the good work they're doing.
Yeah, so Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management is, they're broader than just the current initiative, which is the Mountain Lion Initiative. It's really about realizing that we need to follow the, again, the biologists and Shane Mahoney's beautiful work. We need to follow those that I always get it wrong. Tell me the conservation management tool, Shane's.
Yeah, the North American Wildlife Management Model. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So that's the model that Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management uses. And it was interesting. I had seen they have a great social media presence, and I'd been following them slightly on online, and was very interested, but was busy with my wild sheep stuff. Went to one of the films, actually Robbie Kroger's film Lionheart. He showed it at Sheep Show, and Dan Gates with Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management and Charles from Howl for Wildlife was there, and Robbie. And all of a sudden I felt very bold. And so I went up and I said, "Hey, I'm Jann Demaske, and I would like to help. I don't have a social media platform. I don't, I told them all the things I don't have, but I said, but you know what I do have? I have a really cool trophy room that I would love to host a party, and let's raise some money." And they kind of looked at me like, who in the world is this woman? And it was funny. They just, I handed them my business card, and they said, "Well, we've heard of Jeff." And I said, "Oh, I know, big hunter." And they said, "And we've heard about your trophy room." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's do a party. Let's raise some money." And that's how it all started. And now I go down to the Capitol, and I'm not doing, it's not like I'm going down there and protesting or anything. I'm still very much in the learning stage. But what they're doing and what they're doing for hunters is imperative. because the way the legislation is written, it's way more than mountain lions and bobcats and lynx. It's a slippery slope of what's next. We have government officials who have openly said they are going to go after the hanging fruit. Unfortunately, wild sheep is considered hanging fruit, and the concern is okay. You start with these, with the mountain lion, lynx, and bobcat, and is the next thing wild sheep. And because of the legislation language, it would make that easier.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. No, they're doing a fantastic work, and I'd love to learn more about what Dan and Charles are doing there with those two campaigns. And obviously, they've been very effective, and it's good to see that we have those guys on our team. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Jann, I know you've got an important lunch meeting that I can't keep you from. Anything else we need to sort of close up here before I let you get off to your lunch appointment?
Well, just thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always nice to just visit. You and I could visit for hours.
Well, we should talk about gardening and honey and bees. We said we were going to do that. So, what's going on?
That's my real shtick is my garden. We built a greenhouse last year, and I've gotten one tomato. So I'm not a great gardener. I'm learning. I have lots and lots of flowers. The herbs are crazy. I'm learning to, cook with fresh herbs. When you grow up in northern Wyoming, you don't have a lot of fresh herbs. So last week I took zucchini and bean plants to all my Bible study friends because, again, I planted all these, zucchini seeds and tomato seeds. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do with, I think we had like 30 zucchini plants. And so, gave that out. And then, of course, my little bees. I love my bees.
So are you a bee, you have a beekeeper, right?
Yes, we have Bob the bee guy, Bob Bishop of Windsor, Colorado. Great, lovely human being. So all I really do is supply the land, the water, and the alfalfa. And he comes in and, harvests all the honey. And then my rent is honey. And my daughters made a label for me, and it's called Junie's Bees. And June, because I'm kind of like June Cleaver. I love to cook and clean and all those, dorky things. And it's a product of Jann land, because that's this fictitious land where bad things never happen. We call it Jann land.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to say that the honey is amazing. I use it all the time, and I absolutely love it. And can you talk about, I shouldn't speak out of school here, but can you talk about someone's dog and what the honey did for the dog? Can you talk about that? It's not my story.
It was crazy. So Gray and Renee's dog had kennel cough.
Yeah.
And Renee swears that she started giving the dog a bit of the honey every day, and the kennel cough went away. I mean, and you know what? We use it for allergies. My soon-to-be son-in-law takes a teaspoon of honey every day, and he stopped taking his allergy medicine. And it's just joyful. I mean, it's honey, and they're little bees, and it just makes everybody happy.
Well, somebody told me, actually it was Melanie, I was telling her about Gray and Renee's dog and the kennel cough, and she's like, yeah, it doesn't surprise me. And she goes, you're supposed to eat local honey, though, because the local honey has whatever in it to help you. Pollen. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I hadn't heard that before. So there's a lot going on with bees. Have you ever listened to a bee podcast?
I have not. Are there bee podcasts?
Oh, I guarantee you there's like a podcast dedicated to bees, but that's Bob's job. But here's
the funny thing is tomorrow at 9:30, I'm going to meet with Bob at the greenhouse, and we're going to go out and visit the bees for the first time this year. Yeah, I'm so excited.
Very cool.
So we have about 40 hives.
Wow, that's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot. And so Bob is very sweet. He will, he gave me my original, my rent. And then I just keep buying it because it brings me such joy. I give away honey all the time. It just makes me so happy, which it
Well,
makes me sound like a big dork.
I'm certainly grateful for it. And but there's also the other products. There's the lip balm. There's like the miracle salve that will cure any ailment. It cures cancer, I understand. And
I don't think it cures cancer.
okay.
But you know what? I swear it like the whole chapped lip thing. And, I have a friend that uses it for her psoriasis. And even if it, maybe it doesn't work and it's just the good vibes around it.
Yeah. And if that's all it is, then that's a good thing too. Right. So, awesome. So here's something I'm going to share with you. Joe Rogan's got a podcast and he had a bee girl on there, and her story it's fascinating. So she basically just was like a bee enthusiast and then like became the bee whisperer. And I learned a lot about bees, and it's crazy how complicated they are.
That.
Yeah. It's because it's typical Rogan style, right? It's interesting to listen to. He makes it fun. It doesn't get too techy or sciencey, but it's just a really cool listen. But it got me very fascinated in bees. Not that I'll ever have a beehive, but super.
They're just amazing creatures. My roses have never been so beautiful as since we got bees. And they'll go for miles around, and they're so productive. And we really did them a disservice a couple of years ago, and we have quite a problem, with bees that. All the pesticides, and people don't understand bees. They're fascinating. And and honey never goes bad.
It's amazing.
I read something that they found it in the, like Egyptian tombs or something.
Right. Yeah. And you don't need to pasteurize it. Don't need to do anything to it. It's just there.
It's just there. Yep. Yeah. And honestly, think about it. I'm a sugar fanatic. I love sugar. And so honey is just like, liquid happiness.
Liquid goodness. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool, Jan. I'm going to let you get to your appointment. Thank you so much. It was so much fun to chat with you on
this
today.
was fun, Kyle. Thank you.
Awesome.
I'm honored that you asked.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was, this is for anyone listening, Glenn, this has been my favorite podcast ever.
I'll take that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jan. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right.